Hi everyone, my name is Shawn Alimohammadi. I am part of Team Mahali, and today I'm speaking to Sharne Bloem, the lead architect for Team Mahali. So welcome to a series of videos where we explore sustainable transitions and alternative energy, water, waste and food systems, and basically just alternative designs that are conscious about climate change and persistent social inequalities. To try and tackle the challenges that come with urbanization that will occur in Africa and Asia over the next few decades. So just a little bit about some context. Team Mahali was formed in 2018, initiated by Sharne in participation to a competition called the Solar Decathlon, which is an initiative run by the United States Department of Energy that challenges university level students, architecture students, engineering students, and sustainable design students, as well as marketing, communications, and PR, young professionals to imagine alternative sustainable housing that's got low carbon and water footprints and is also net zero, so self-powering with a solar photovoltaic system. So Team Mahali was the only Sub-Saharan African team to compete in the first ever Solar Decathlon Africa, and we were shortlisted with 20 other university teams from across the world. So that's just some context. Today, we'll be chatting about the design process that occurred over the 18-month period, and just some reflections about the design process. So thank you, Sharne, and without further ado, let's jump into it. So I'm going to start off at the beginning. What was the inspiration for the house's design?
Hey, Shawn, thank you very much for having me. Our inspiration in the beginning was sort of based on, in the African continent, it's rich with interesting passive design techniques and handcrafts and traditional building materials. And we live close to nature, we consider its influence in order to survive daily. And the sun's power is well known in Africa, and our living spaces, we either embrace it or we hide from it. And especially in the semi-arid areas, the tension to work with these two opposites become more evident and necessary. And I think in all levels, the Mahali house is a tree that we sit under. So in many parts of Africa, a tree is used as a site for important gatherings and social events and knowledge sharing and spontaneous discussions. And using this nature-inspired concept as a departure point, the primary overarching structure of the design provided the same multifunctionality as a tree, So our 4-column cantilever, as you can see in this model, steel structure forms the central point of the tree and allows a tensile membrane envelope over. So this envelope is integrated with thin film photovoltaic panels, and just as any tree found in nature, the structure produces energy which is used to power the house. So the tree structure also allows for rainwater to be captured and channeled and stored in a central water feature and a water bladder for the overflow. So you can see on this picture, and you can also use the water then for the food garden or for the PV panels. So the tree structure over provides shade for the entire footprint of the building, and this maximizes obviously passive temperature control, natural lighting and breathability.
Okay, nice. I really like the fact that the structure is really multifunctional. So it's not only providing shade, but it's also producing energy as the solar panels are installed on top of the roof. And then, as you said, it also channels rainwater. So as it rains, the water hits the roof and then flows into the central courtyard. And then, as you said, gets stored into
Yeah.
a water bladder, which is 2,000 liters. Okay. And can I ask, so with the design process, we've seen from the past and in history tells us that generally for an innovation to occur, there are multiple iterations. So there are, a few versions before the final product is decided on. With the designing of this building, was this the pattern that played out? Were there a few designs, or did you just decide on this design? And then was this the design that was sketched in the technical drawings and then constructed in Morocco last year?
Yeah, and I mean, like you say, there is some process involved in something like design of a building or anything. Yeah, I think that in our case, we also had like a process, and we had some brainstorming sessions with the team and all kinds of things. But initially, we had one design, and we basically developed that to detailed design phase, and obviously work from there. But yeah, the starting point, if I can tell you a little bit about the process, let me just see, I'll share this again. The starting point, am I sharing something with you?
Yeah.
Let me just try that again. Share screen. Awesome. So we're back. Yeah, I hope our internet is not too bad now, but let's try this.
They're perfect. I can see that.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, cool. So yeah, the starting point of our substructure was basically like a house in a box concept. Let me just find the next thing. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's to easily, implement a house like this throughout Africa. And it was decided to make use of a single standard recycled side opening container, like you can see on this picture. And so benefits of that, there's no modification that needs to happen, and it's easily, obviously, transported, and you could pack all the components inside here and then ship it somewhere or transport it throughout Africa. And this container can then form part of a living area in our case, and the kitchen and the bathroom on the one side. And the house in a box feature enables, like a quick build time and construction off site. So you can build the entire house beforehand and ship it wherever you need it or transport it there. And the container structure, the benefits of that is it's affordable and durable and obviously modular and pest proof and sustainable. So, you recycle a huge load of steel. Yeah, so the layout of the house, which was the second sort of element that we looked at, that was based on traditional courtyard typology. So you can see here that from the central cattle patterns, where dwellings were arranged around the central, cattle enclosure, to the traditional Ashanti dwelling here in the center, and then the Moroccan riad on the other side. Yeah, this layout also has advantages, and I mean, it comes from many centuries ago. So, it brings security and privacy and flexibility and adaptability, in a space like this. So it's also often arranged around a water feature, a water point, like you can see in the Riyadh picture. And that can obviously play a role in cooling down the house, and also for aesthetic purposes. So I think, whereas in the Mahali house, the central water point where we harvested the rainwater. That played it's the same element. So I think that container that forms the main living area has a structural integrity, which means it does not require any modification, like I mentioned, and it allows the kitchen and bathroom to be fitted prior to the shipping, and the container side opening open most of the time to expand the living area, and you can use the patio area. I will show some more pictures in a minute. And then the bedroom pots, the original design had these beautiful OSB plywood ribs that we were going to cut from CNC cut ribs, and then obviously clad this with OSB board or with plywood. I think in the South African scenario, that would be the cheapest option to go forward in using those elements. And then obviously the same system is then used in line, in sort of adjacent to the container. So it creates these living bedrooms. And then if you look at the tensile, the membrane roof covering, like we've mentioned before, the shading of that, it shades the entire footprint. So, it's passive cooling and regulating of temperature for the living area. And I think the fact that the living spaces are raised, that's also naturally ventilated, and hot air being allowed to rise through those slots of the decking, and kind of, flows, the air flows then outside, because of the roof structure is also designed in a way that it slanted inwards towards the water harvesting pond. So I think the entire vertical perimeter can be covered with shade netting, or at least the parts where there's no pods. And this could also be, a passive cooling element, in the sense that if there's direct sun penetrating from the east, you can close that down and have the other side open, or the other way around, so you can regulate temperature throughout the day to keep it shady inside and cool. Because for the Moroccan context, it was super hot there, and I think that that played a vital role in that time to keep our indoor climate to as low as we could. So I think there was some other elements as well that we looked at, and one of them were the waste to wonder, or the trash to treasure elements. And I think starting with the shipping container, that was the first recycled item that was repurposed, and that's about 2,500 kilograms of steel right there, that you reuse and repurpose. And the cladding around the house, if I can show you this, this was the plastic panels that were crocheted by ladies in the Franschhoek Valley. And so the cladding is obviously labor intensive, but it's also job creation and skills building, and
they're made out of recycled plastic bags as well.
Yes.
So
yes,
how many plastic
and
bags were used?
I think that we had, was it about 9,000, Shawn, or 9,600, or what was it? A lot, eh?
I think, it was somewhere in between the region of 7,500 to 9,000.
Okay. Yeah.
And the exterior of the house was paneled with these.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's, this was one of the elements, but so for our interior decorating elements, we also, like the beds, the furniture, the bean bags, the planter boxes, all those were made from recycled materials. And true to a design build project, you know, in the process. The original design, the one that I've just told you about, I mean, some elements do become kind of less easy to install on site, or I mean, the constraints could be budget or time, you know, lead time constraints, or even in the case of CNC cutters, you know, like you can't always find the equipment there. But I mean, I can tell you more about the limitations if you want to know some specific examples.
So I think that would be good.
This is just another picture of the. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I mean, I told you about the tree that was like a key element, the biomimicry element in the house. So in this picture, you can see like so our tree-like cantilever steel structure over was basically the first thing to be amended, because our design was too expensive and sophisticated for the local subcontractors that we wanted to use in Morocco. And so our design was, like I said, very expensive in this regard. So this we like got a guy there from the local market to weld this 12 square meter structure for us. And we had to introduce, so if you remember correct, like in the beginning we had the cantilevered steel structure in the center, but in this case we had to introduce like verticals on the perimeter to make it structurally sane, you know. So so it changed a little bit of the design of the house, which were more like clean probably and all of that. And the second thing I also mentioned was the CNC cutting. So if you can see the parts over here, it's like it became like a stud wall. So our very funky, curvy parts had to change from the ribs that we were going to use from plywood, because plywood is also extremely expensive in Morocco. And in South Africa, it's a very decent option to use if you want to save money. So yeah, so this was then cladded with OSB, and then on top of that we had the panels, these plastic panels that we've mentioned before. Yeah, so the other thing was we had to become very creative and sort of innovative in our like finishing touches, like the furniture and things like this. So we managed to get these fences, someone threw them out, and we reworked them and then created this beautiful toilet. It's a dry toilet to save water, and it was we created these beautiful planter boxes. And yeah, the other thing was we also used some of the printer tubes at UCT and OSB boxes that we're basically we're gonna throw them out. We reuse them to create these beautiful furniture pieces in our house. I mean, the insulation was also a challenge for us, because originally we wanted to use hempcrete, and we couldn't find the way to work with a local supplier in Morocco. I think there was a bit of conflict of interest.
Legal challenges.
Yeah, I don't know. There were some challenges. And then our second option was to use shredded newspaper, which is something that gets used in Europe in passive housing so easily. But it was not, you couldn't find the tools or the equipment in Morocco. So it made it really hard to implement that. So at the end, yeah, we had to just go with rock wool. We ran out of time, I think, and we had a deadline to reach. So I mean, some of the technical things, we had the most amazing water efficiency and water saving systems that we wanted to incorporate, such as grey water filters. and air to water systems. But unfortunately, our budget couldn't handle that. So at the end, we installed aerated taps and shower heads to save about 70% of the water flow. And I think that's something that came from the Cape Town drought that we had. Yeah. And I think the other thing was, I can show you that. Yeah, we had a very, very high-tech solar system. Being a net zero energy house, I think that was...
Sorry to interrupt, Shawn. Before we go to energy, just one thing about water as well, while we're chatting about water, I think it's also quite cool to note that the structure didn't require any water for construction.
Yes,
and
exactly.
That's because the foundation doesn't require a concrete foundation. Could you maybe chat more about how you worked around that?
Yeah, okay. So technically you don't need that, but for the competition, they insisted that we have a slab, which was obviously not something that we felt comfortable with. So, but you can do, if you install this somewhere else, you could do, you get different like foundation solutions that you can use. That's basically like pens that you penetrate into the ground, or it's like a little, it's like almost like a big
jack or something.
Yeah, stuff like that. So you can, there's different ways. But I think what was important for us to keep it elevated. So even though they wanted us to install the house on top of the slab, we insisted that they then provide us with little steps. And these steps, basically elevated the house and created the passive airflow and cooling. And but I think in the case of doing a I have more control over the foundation part of things. The foundations would have looked differently and less concretey. Yeah.
Okay, so obviously saved on water and on carbon emissions as well by not having to that foundation.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that was the whole point. And I mean, concrete is it's a resource that's readily available everywhere in the world, but we're running out of that. So it's not sustainable to keep on using concrete when you don't need it, you know?
Yeah, and the carbon embeddedness as well for concrete. I think it's almost proportionate. So 1 ton of carbon dioxide is embedded in 1 ton of concrete because of the way that they're manufacturing it, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I thought that was a nice point to raise.
Yeah, exactly.
You can continue about the energy system.
Yeah. Yeah, so this energy system, we used a very, very high-tech, sophisticated system with, you can see on the right, these, the flexible solar PV panels, and the optimizers. So we were sponsored half of the system with the optimizers and the inverter, a 9 kilowatt inverter, which was a lovely big system. And what was nice about the panels is they were flexible, so you could like bend them. So it's easy to apply and to install them on a membrane over like this one. And obviously then creating the leaf, that's generating the energy for the tree, and the same year, powering our house with our roof structure over. I think, I mean, we had a very small team, like, but I think, and I mean, we were not fluent in Arabic or French, so it made things quite tricky on site to reach a deadline within 21 days. And that's all we had. But I think we managed to do really well, and also finished second place in architecture and design, which I'm very proud of. I'm sure everyone is. So this was our team. And there's Shawn.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for sharing that whole process. I think it's really, really interesting to note how There are these various factors that influence the design decisions. As you said, budget was always a constraint. We had to work with a specific budget. So we had seed funding of 50,000 US dollars, but then whatever extra we had to do our own fundraising, which was quite challenging. And then apart from budget, there were supplier difficulties and procurement of different supplies, and then also equipment difficulties in sourcing, the necessary equipment in Morocco. And then, yeah, also the social dynamics as well, I think. It must have been quite difficult to manage a multidisciplinary team of, very diverse individuals with very different and quite radical and innovative ideas. So yeah, thanks for sharing those different waves of design basically. And then maybe just one last question: if you had to do the Solar Decathlon again this year, what would you do differently in the design?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question to always like reflect back on, what you've experienced, how things were, things like that, and I think you touched on one of it is the social side of things. I mean, I think our team were very diverse. We came from different disciplines, different level of experience on a site, and I think most of the team had almost no experience. So that, I think one thing that I would do this time around, if I had it like a second chance, is to basically do just a Saturday or 2 Saturdays, just like some basic training of how to use a drill effectively, how to use a wood cut, like a timber cutting machine, like an angle cutter, all of that, So I think, or just some other basics, because I think because we were so pressed for time, and it was like in the busiest time of our academic calendar, I think a lot of our team members were literally running from tests into the Moroccan house, diving, doing stuff, then trying to submit, some modules. It was crazy. I mean, for any northern hemispherish, university, they ran from September to September. So this was like the beginning of the year. They had no commitments. For us, this is the end of our year, So I think that was quite something. And we were the only Southern Hemisphere team that took part. So, and also, I don't know, yeah. I think the other thing is the insulation. I touched on that earlier, is that, I mean, I don't get excited about rock wool, to be honest. Although it's like a recycled product from glass, and there is some good qualities, and I know it's very popular in South Africa. I think it would have been great if we could experiment on site with, say, straw bale and lime, and water, and create our own little panels that's like maybe 10, 15, centimeters thick, and things like that. So I think there's even the hempcrete. I mean, it's a pity that didn't work out, because it would have been perfect, So I think insulation was definitely like a Achilles to me. Like I felt like we could have done better there. We could have been more innovative. And I think the other thing is the plastic panels. Although they were very beautiful and vibrant and created like this beautiful representation of like vibrance in Africa and like all the colors we have in our continent and all of this, I think maybe plastic on the outside is a bit risky, in the sense that, with sandstorms and like intense sun, I don't know what is the microplastic erosion that happens, So I think in that regard, I'm a bit concerned about that, to be honest. But I think that's the beauty of this, urban living labs, is that you experiment with solutions, you experiment with materials. So I think in that regard, I'm happy that we actually use this element as our external cladding, but I am wondering if it wouldn't have had a more effective and more safer way to use it on the inside, to make the inside of the house super vibrant and all of this, to still represent you know, the vibrance in our continent, and then have the outside of the house maybe cladded with lime and clay, because I mean Morocco is really rich in clay, you know, so it's a element that's easy, that you could easily use. And I think at the moment the timber on the inside also gives that nice, you know, grounded feeling of, you know, sort of calm, you know, nature. It's like timber, you know, with the plywood, and the outside is vibrant, you know. But I think if you reverse it, it could also work. Like have a vibrant inside, and then, like, you know, have the more natural colors on the outside. Yeah, so I think those three things are probably the main things that I would revisit before going
Have to
on
do it again.
Mahali number 2.
Maybe next year, who knows? I would definitely be keen. And I think experimenting with hemp insulation is definitely something that we should look at.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I like the point that you raised about the living laboratory. And yeah, I think basically the Mahali design is a living design, as an excuse for the construction noise in the background. There's some guys with a jackhammer upstairs. But I think,
Yeah.
yeah, this notion of living design is really interesting because it really allows for experimentation, such as experimentation with the plastic panels that, you know, now in retrospect, we would say, let's rather put them on the inside rather than the exterior. And I mean, these are only things that you learn by experimenting with them. And yeah, I think that's the beauty that you can get with a living design. It's never really fixed. It's all in relation to what kind of limitations there are and the time and place. You know, different countries have different resources available. Um, so yeah, just really according to the time and the place. Um, but I think we're going to end it there. And thank you so much, Sharne. And I'm looking forward to chatting with you again in another video.
Thanks, Shawn. Yeah, it was lovely having this discussion and revisiting fond memories.
Awesome. Chat soon.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Cheers.